Hello people. I've noticed that talking to most people is a waste of time, is draining and boring. This is because they either don't know anything, don't know how to think, react emotionally, or seek to control and dominate you in some way. I'm going to briefly describe 25 ways that spring to mind which demonstrate this, then briefly suggest what to do instead. I take great delight in talking to people and having interesting discussions. It was only after I'd explored the extremes of physical exercise that I truly discovered the sheer joy that can be had from exercising the mind. Discussion does this, as words are thoughts in audible form that are exchanged with others and then honed. However, when I say discussion, I mean an informed, intelligent and honest reciprocal exchange of information, free from biases, at least as much as is possible in the human condition, between two or more emotionally healthy and intellectually honest people, with the intention of mutual personal development and the improving of each party's model of reality. This rules out most people though, and therefore the kind of entertaining, pleasurable discussion I'm talking about is rare. It is rare because most people operate on the human operating system 1.0. Therefore, they are part of the herd, are self-interested, self-absorbed, emotionally stunted, retarded fucking idiots who behave in the ways I will elaborate on shortly. Due to my development and experience in my formative years, I am now what could politely be called a black sheep. Think attachment theory and the biopsychosocial model. I was naive as fuck. However, going into the world I became hyper aware of the bullshit games and backstabbing people engage in. At first I thought I was an alien, then schizoid, then autistic, possibly Aspie, then alien again. Now finally I think INTJ. There is, however, a big overlap in these constructs, and the reality is a label does not matter. Actions speak louder than words, and it is how somebody thinks and behaves that matters. Anyway, this has led to me being emotionally removed from human affairs with little affinity for them, and therefore more capable of objectively analysing them and seeing it all for the total and utter meaningless bullshit it all is. Although this prevents deriving pleasure from the usual inane and meaningless social exchanges, rituals and ceremonies, mindless platitudes and the repetitive, boring, unoriginal, unauthentic, dishonest and superficial garbage that comes out of people's mouths, it allows for more original and authentic, abstract, objective and interesting thoughts, the pleasure derived from which is immeasurable compared to talking to boring bastards. It would take all day to articulate a 10-second thought to a normie, and they wouldn't understand it anyway, because they haven't got the intelligence or the prerequisite learning to help formulate such a conceptualization at all, let alone to such depth. Humans have evolved to derive pleasure from these exchanges, and anyone operating on human OS 1.0 will do, whereas we not only can't derive pleasure from such exchanges, they actively disengage us. Anyway, I'm waffling on. Without further ado, here are 25 ways that make talking to people boring, a waste of time, unproductive, draining, and just not worth it. I should add, I've spoken about these to unintelligent members of the herd who just don't get it, so therefore I think you need a certain level of analysis and awareness to understand, albeit quite low. It's not rocket science. This is especially the case when in dynamic discussion and when having to listen to people behaving in this way. As words represent thoughts, some of the points show how stupid people are, others show how people try to lie, cheat, manipulate and use language as a tool. Think of discursive analysis. In the order they spring to mind. Number 1. Intellectual dishonesty. I have an extremely good memory, and I often hear people contradict what they said weeks, months or years earlier. They only say what they think is conducive to their needs at the time in order to achieve what they want to achieve with words. This could be virtue signalling to position themselves on the moral high ground and you on the low. This is usually done in relation to whatever is in vogue at the time, because they have no original thoughts or general ideas themselves, and only talk about what appears in their physical environment or stimuli from popular culture and society. Yes, one person's opinions can be radically different based on a slight change in context. I've had herd members try to call me out on this, but that was because they could not understand that a small change in context meant a big change in thought. Either that, or they were being dishonest in their representation. In any case, be aware. Number 2, not understanding concepts but still talking anyway. People understand coming in a hole and 9 months later having a meat bag pop out. They understand that the burn in their stomachs means eat, and the full feeling in their arses means shit. Their minds don't allow them to tackle more complex and interesting concepts though. I was talking to someone about important existential issues like the meaning and purpose of life. Obviously, there is no objective predetermined meaning or purpose, and thinkers know this. Think of absurdism and nihilism. You make your own meaning, and even then it doesn't matter. The concepts of objectivity and subjectivity are relevant and important here. When talking to this person, it became apparent quite quickly that they did not understand these concepts at all. I saw that blank look in their eyes, and they still kept talking. Why do they do that? They were digging themselves a bigger hole, but did not realise it. It makes the whole discussion pointless. I would say it is taking the idea of fuzzy data too far, but they wouldn't even know what that is. Number 3, superstitious bullshit. People either implicitly or explicitly talk about superstition or in superstitious ways, giving the idea credence. They do this whether they are aware or not. This could be karma, religion, old wives' tales, and so on. One definition of superstition is an irrational belief that an object, action or circumstance not logically related to a course of events influences its outcome. Obviously there are reasons why this happens, and the main one is our primitive pattern-seeking neurology, not tempered by intelligent and critical thought. When a crow landed on somebody's roof, people thought that meant someone had died or will die in that house, and attributed it to dark forces. I mean, that was just a coincidence. It's ridiculous. This leads on to the next point. Number 4, the confusion of correlation and cause and effect. This is similar to the last point. The difference, it seems, is that it is an irrational belief that an object, action or circumstance that is logically related to a course of events influences its outcome. This is still stupid, but more forgivable than superstitious thought, because superstition is made up bullshit based on a small sample, where factors rarely coincide. A stupid person will think that correlation equals causation, because by definition they often occur together. We know that that does not imply cause though. Sometimes when you hear people talk, you feel like you need to tell them to shut the fuck up, tell them how to think, and then start all over again. Number 4, all style, no substance. I've noticed that there is little depth in what a lot of people say. Their ideas, if they have any, and opinions aren't considered in depth or based on facts or evidence. They are usually emotionally derived and or extrapolated from a sample of one, their own experience. Because they are self-important, they try to put forth their ideas with authority, but because their ideas are worthless, uninformed garbage, they don't have credence or authority. They try to make up for this in a number of ways, such as using authoritative body language and tone of voice. For example, they might lean into you, take their glasses off as if to say, "Look, I'm being serious now, believe me," look you in the eyes, slow their speech and deepen their voice to be dramatic. This, of course, is all very contrived, like lawyers, politicians, salesmen and actors, etc. Don't be fooled. Many people who do this also behave in the way my next point describes. Number 5. Bullshitters and buzzwords. I've known many people who fool others around them into thinking that they are competent, informed and knowledgeable, and therefore worthy and capable of the kind of interesting discussion I happen to like. They usually do this by acting in a glib and confident manner. When involved in or within earshot of a discussion, they will join in by paraphrasing what you have just said using buzzwords and phrases, specific popular terminology and loosely related words, but without having a deeper understanding. They do this to try to give the impression that they are informed and competent, because when they hear you talking in an informed way, they realise that you are informed. They cannot bear to be positioned lower than you, so therefore try to create the view in your mind that they are also informed. This works on fellow stupid people, but not thinkers like us. Those last 2 points have led me to think that the people who employ those tactics really believe that they can be competent in a field by using those tactics. Fake it till you make it, blagging their way through life and surrounding themselves by hangers-on who buy their bullshit. It therefore seems that they are superficial bastards, not interested in or capable of dealing in depth of thought. Number 6. The behaviour of journalists. Obviously, people who aren't journalists also do this, but they exemplify my point well. There are 3 points here. 1 is clickbait. This is obviously everywhere as mentioned. One disgusting example is recently at the start of the war in Ukraine, when there was talk of Russia using nukes. The next day there was a news article reporting that there had been a huge explosion in Ukraine, with a picture showing a big mushroom cloud. It wasn't a nuke, just a big bomb, but the picture had been carefully lifted from a video with the frame selected that looked the most like the aftermath of a nuclear explosion. Fuck you, journalists. Completely intellectually dishonest misrepresentation just to get traction. Clickbait can be porn, anything dramatic, appealing or desirable, such as a honey trap. It can be in the usual way I've just described, or it can be in talk, when someone misrepresents to get your attention. This harks back to previous points. The second, when I was younger, I fell into the trap of thinking that a person who was bright, confident and a talker is informed and competent, and that conversely, to a certain extent, that a quiet loner with his head down is not. How wrong this is. Journalists are good at portraying themselves as clever through the use of articulate and eloquent speech. It seems to me, though, that they are learned in journaling and not critical thinking. This is patently obvious. Think of Piers Morgan. He talks about things and he's got no fucking idea what he's going on about. There's no point in conveying information if you can't understand it sufficiently to do so. That's quite important, Piers. You see this a lot when a news editor decides to report on a random research report of the thousands and thousands and thousands that are compiled each year. The presenter then paraphrases the report. It is clear they've got no fucking idea what they're talking about. To hide their stupidity, they could just read the abstract, if they knew what that was. The third. Examples like the Lorraine Kelly interview of Brian Cox, if you can call it that. This guy is a professor of particle physics, and he was on a show with Lorraine Kelly. She should have stuck to talking about knitting and baking, because she was so far out of her depth. Anyway, he was talking about stuff way over her head, and she's asking stupid, inane questions to the point where the look on his face was comical. He was thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? The point is that she wasn't fully engaged in the conversation, and she wasn't listening. She wouldn't understand anyway, mind. She was thinking what her next question would be. It was all scripted and contrived and an absolute embarrassment. Thinking what you're going to say next means you're not listening, therefore you cannot be part of the discussion. I'll put a link below to the interview if I can find it, otherwise find it yourself. Brian Cox leads me on to my next point. Number 7. People dumb down what they say, and it's excruciating. It's always appropriate to tailor your message to your audience, not just the depth of concept, but the way it is communicated. When you're at least 2 standard deviations to the right on the bell curve, it means that most things you hear pour out of people's mouths is either shit or dumbed down for their benefit. It seems there are 2 ways that this happens. The first is by intelligent people. Brian Cox was doing it when explaining the universe on his TV programme. He was talking about complex theories and information, but dumbing it down and speaking so slowly in the process I had to turn it off. I understand he does that to make it broad and appealing for the sake of ratings and education of the masses. Otherwise, the few idiots who do watch it would never understand. Even so, it was painful. The second way is when stupid people dumb down something that is also stupid because they think they are clever and or what they are talking about is complex, when it's not. You know when you guess what someone is going to say and you've already pulled it apart before their mouth stops moving because you can think infinitely faster than their large protruding jaws can move? That's what I'm talking about. Boring. Number 8. Superiority. I've noticed that when people talk, they do so in such a way that tries to give the impression that their subject is more important or dominant than anything else, and tries to claim or reclaim hegemony. The subject could be anything, but I found it's usually football or any other mainstream and popular sport, interest, hobby, pastime, or another element of culture, usually masculine. They do this by steering the conversation back to this topic, by talking loudly and in a domineering way, especially when there are others present who are not part of the conversation. It's almost as if the underlying message is that this is important, more important than what you were talking about, so talk about this instead. Their body language gives the same message. Think of theory of mind. I've also noticed that this behaviour seems to filter down generations. This is particularly the case in football culture. Number 9. Superiority 2. This is related to the last point, but slightly different. When talking to someone, you may even ask a question, and instead of giving a straightforward answer, they will lecture you for half an hour, or at least try to. When doing this, they tell you every little detail, even though you already knew it, and they go far, far beyond what you asked or what is necessary to answer. This is mainly done when other people are present. The intention is to position you as less powerful by being uninformed and stupid, and in contrast to position themselves as in a dominant position of power by being more knowledgeable and helpful by conveying that knowledge to you. The reality is they are using you as a dispensable tool. Number 10. Opinions or feelings trump facts. No pun intended. I'd vote Trump all day before any SJW. This one speaks for itself, and I could talk all day about this, but I'm on the 5th sheet already. We live in a post-fact universe. Facts, universal truths, hard science no longer seem to matter, even to many so-called intellectuals. People think that if they think something is true, then it is true, and that their opinion is more important than hard evidence. All rolled into this are problems with critical analysis, such as sampling errors, extrapolation, and, as mentioned, cause and effect, etc. It calls into question people's epistemological nature. Basically, they're fucking thick. Examples include transgenderism and transsexualism, where, If someone thinks they are a member of the opposite sex, they expect us to think the same. This defies science, albeit in the majority of cases. It seems to me that cultural pressure, lobby and pressure groups, and people with selfish interests are currently the squeakiest wheels who get the most oil, while in the process marginalising science and common sense. Of course, it doesn't help that most of this behaviour is emotionally driven and people can't let it go. When reacting to emotional stimuli, the brain pathways are shorter than the cognitive ones. Emotional reactions are therefore quicker and less likely to produce an appropriate response. Number 11. Discussions become combative and people become insulting. This usually happens as a result of the last point, and people seem to hear ideas, internalise them and regurgitate them without thinking. They don't even think about it themselves. Therefore, they regurgitate it and talk bullshit. One example of this is when someone tried to tell me that they can put a tablespoon of chia seeds into a pint glass and that after filling it with water, the seeds will absorb the water back down to the size of a tablespoon. Clearly, that person had never thought about what he said, which is why he said it. It's fucking garbage. Anyway, I was racking my brains considering the molecular structure and mass of each substance and thinking how it could be possible. As we know, for practical purposes, water cannot be compressed. I perhaps naively told him that his claim defies the laws of physics. He then became loud, rude, obnoxious and insulting and tried to justify his claim by criticising me in other irrelevant ways, which was odd. This just highlights again people's lack of thought and their emotion and ego-driven behaviour. He clearly cared more about his pathetic ego than improving his model of reality. And when people become insulting, it is clear they have lost, although only they frame it as combative and adversarial. Intelligent thinkers do not. Number 12. Plausible deniability. This point is an example of many concepts that people might be aware of but don't know the specific terminology, and this one is used quite often. So, plausible deniability. I've noticed that through selective use of words, people talk with plausible deniability to try to trick you into thinking, saying or doing something that benefits them, and that if and when challenged, they can plausibly deny it. For example, if I ask you, did you steal my beer? You might say, I don't even like beer. You haven't denied taking the beer, but you have implied that you didn't take it because you don't like beer. Whether or not you like it is irrelevant though. You could have taken the beer to throw away or sell. I might then go away thinking you haven't taken it. Then, when I find out you have and challenge you, you can deny denying taking it. Because you didn't actually say that, but what you did say formed the impression in my head that you didn't take it. This is a failure of awareness and analysis on the part of the victim, which the perpetrator takes advantage of. I know it's a shit example, but this is just another form of intellectual dishonesty, and if you are aware of it, it's easy to spot, unless you're thick. Number 13. Being argumentative. This is an obvious one. We've all seen some arsehole who likes arguing for the sake of it, or because they're a self-important bastard, usually trying to make themselves look and sound clever. I'm not saying you shouldn't stand your ground if you're informed, but you know what I mean. I found that people agree or disagree based on their subjective feelings towards whoever they're agreeing or disagreeing with. Just think about that for a second. Information, facts, and knowledge have the quality of being true or untrue, correct or incorrect, subjectivity and phenomenology aside. Yes, there are nuances, but the kind of person who behaves in this way is too fucking thick to think in a nuanced way, and only thinks in black and white. How the fuck else could they allow themselves to disbelieve information based on a personal bias? They even try to tell you black is white and dig themselves deeper. Being argumentative leads me on to my next point. Number 14. Not being argumentative. A few points here. 1. Some people don't debate or discuss, even in the most casual and friendliest of ways, because they literally do not know a thing. Therefore, they have no opinions, evidence-based, of course, or knowledge. I'm not talking about shouting and screaming at each other, just a friendly exchange to thrash it out. It's like they've never picked up a book or watched a documentary. What happened to all those years of compulsory education? I mean, now we've got the internet, the biggest information resource at your fingertips 24/7. You can see in their eyes when the conversation turns to something more interesting other than what they want for tea or where they want to go on holiday. It's fucking boring. It's almost like they don't want to learn new things, aren't interested and are incapable. Do you think it will be rewarding and fulfilling talking to a person like that? No, it won't. The next point. Other people who aren't argumentative are people who perceive themselves to be higher or better than you are, or perceive themselves to have some sort of power over you. This obviously includes police, who use many of the tactics I've mentioned in this video. They will be open and say to you, "I'm not arguing with you," or something similar. By doing this, they characterise a polite disagreement in a negative way, and as a shouting, hostile argument, making you less likely to stand up for yourself. The reason they say this is because they want to establish authority over you, which they attempt to do by silencing you and putting forward their ideas in an attempt to dominate you. They do not want to discuss the issue at hand, because you will be right and they will be shown to be wrong. This will remove their moral authority and power over you. Obviously, this shows them to be tyrants and thick. If they think this tactic will work on us, they are wrong. A similar thing people say is, "Don't think too deeply," or "You're thinking too deeply into it." They say this because at our level of analysis and informed thinking, we will be shown to be right. Therefore, they want you to accept a conclusion, their conclusion, based on limited input, and they know if you analyse it further, it will show them to be wrong. 2 reasons for this. They are trying to deceive you and think you're stupid, or they really think that their uninformed learning and decision making is sufficient. They're thick. What kind of person does not want to make decisions based on all the knowledge and thorough analysis? An idiot, or someone trying to gain control over you. The very point of a mind is to improve outcomes by being more informed and having a better decision-making process. Memory-based prediction, also known as intelligence. The core feature of a mind is that it cannot conceptualize anything beyond its capability. Obvious, really. Therefore, from our point of view, it is a waste of time even attempting dialogue with some people about the kind of things we like to talk about. And when in discussion or debate, they will never understand, even if they try to. Number 15. People talk in an ingratiating way. People can do this whether they like you or not. They talk and behave in a way that is intended to please you or win your favour. They do this because they want to create a favourable representation of themselves in your mind, usually because it will positively influence the way you interact with them and benefit them in some way. This is an act of deception, particularly if you're not switched on to it. So always be aware of people's behaviour, past and present, and remember that actions speak louder than words. Number 16. People can only understand simple concepts. People follow the narrative. They have no critical thought, and they don't have their own ideas. Words represent thoughts. The more complex the thoughts, the longer and more verbose someone's speech will be, even when concise. People say, "I can't get a word in." Well, my thoughts are usually deep and complex and take longer than one fucking sentence to detail. By then, people are usually bored because all they want to hear is yes or no, or good or bad. If you've gotten this far in this video, well done for listening to my monotonous voice for so long. Maybe I'm a boring bastard. However, 2 reasons why people get bored are because things are too easy or things are too hard. I know which one it is for them. People like popular culture and shite. They don't like deep, meaningful conversations, and even if they claim to, it might be about fucking astrology or some other shit like alien visits, like they've never heard of the Fermi paradox. When elaborating a point and asking for critical analysis by saying, "What do you think?" people just say, "You sound right," because they've never thought about it before and don't know what the fuck you're talking about. To prove my point, I could present a shining example of sophistry to someone, and because they're fucking stupid, they will just say, "Yeah, you're right," because they don't know the subject, cannot think critically, and will never research it themselves and produce their own ideas. Obviously, by definition, an example of sophistry will be wrong, but you already knew that, right? That's another point actually, sophistry. A plausible but fallacious argument. Do not be fooled. Never believe an argument based on authority. Only believe it based on its own merit. Number 17. People have short memories, cannot abstract and only focus on minor points. When explaining a point, I might find it useful to use analogies or examples to help my listener understand. They will then forget the wider point and message and focus exclusively on the example I used. Although it is useful to analyse everything, the example was just that. It was only used to illustrate a point. This tells me that they have a small working memory, which apparently overlaps greatly with intelligence. That they cannot abstract and can only focus on minutiae and not the bigger picture. Number 18. People forget meaningful aspects of discussion. When engaged in talk with someone, it is natural that important and meaningful aspects of the self enter discussion. Unfortunately, the next time you talk to this person, they will say or do something that indicates they have completely forgotten that you introduced this meaningful aspect about yourself, even though they acknowledged it at the time. I'm not saying I'm important or people should remember everything about me, but if they don't, what is the point in talking to these people if they don't even remember? Number 19. People don't listen. Again, maybe I'm just boring, but listening is an active process. People say they have a poor memory, but their memory has never been tested because it never receives input. They are always thinking about what they want to say next. Discursive analysis. They want to use words as a tool to achieve something instead of an honest exchange of information for the betterment of all. Number 20. People introduce a subject or talk about something because it is relevant to them or portrays them in a good light. This one's quite obvious and I don't think any examples are needed, but it's quite boring. It's blatant, you can easily see what they're doing, and it is an attempt at deception. Number 21. People don't understand or recognise profoundness. So, as mentioned, the core quality, or not, of a mind is that it cannot conceptualise anything beyond its ability. This is obvious when you think about it. A chicken will never understand the theory of general relativity. Our experience boils down to computational processes in our brains. Imagine you have a computer graphics card. The production of high-quality, complex graphics quickly depends on the ability of the graphics card. Better card, better graphics. Equally, our brains are limited in producing our experiences based on their abilities, number of neurons, connections, and speed. Despite the biopsychosocial model, this still boils down to the physical structure of the brain. The profoundness I'm talking about might be depth of emotion or strength of experience. When articulating this to someone, it is clear they do not understand the profoundness that you are talking about, nor will they ever. It is evident in their faces, words, and subsequent behaviour. Think theory of mind. I have even noticed that in response to talking about hugely important, deep and meaningful aspects of experience, people appear to react in a cliched way and use predictable words and responses. This indicates to me they are mere flesh robots going through the motions with no depth of experience themselves, and therefore nothing to relate it to. They appear to be acting out a part and appear like they are NPCs, and therefore it makes me think I'm living a solipsistic experience. And if that is true, surely it wouldn't matter if I ended them. Number 22. People claim to be offended when in discussion. This one is pathetic, and it also seems like it is some sort of attempt at control. Because if they say to you, oh, that offends me, and it's an attempt to shut you up, which being offended is not an argument. It's just not a point. And anyone who is affected by this must be as stupid as the people who complain about it. Anyway, if you're offended by grown-ups talking, then fuck off. Number 23. People will use language to try to position you as weak or below them. This is just a general point, and it overlaps on some of the points I've talked about already, and there's no examples needed here. I'm sure you can think of some. Discursive analysis, blah blah blah. Number 24. Gaslighting. This is a huge subject. There are loads of videos on YouTube, so look it up. You'll know the concept, but might not know what it's called. Invalidating people's experiences. There's so many different ways people do this, for so many different reasons, but generally it's an attempt to invalidate and belittle and control you. So in the past, people who I've spoken to who complain about this from other people, I've tried to give them ways of dealing with it, but they fall flat on their face, and I think the reason is because you've got to be quick and clever in actually identifying that it's happening to you, and then you've also got to be quick to think of ways to deal with it dynamically in discussion. But you can only tell people how to go on, you can't do it or be there for them. Right, finally, number 25. Boring subjects and small talk. Now, a lot of people will find this video quite boring, but I think if you've got this far, it must have piqued your interest slightly. Anyway, the 5 F's, I call it, make up the majority of what people like talking about. Facebook, Fosters, football, food, and fucking. Facebook encompasses their shitty lives that they like to document on social media. You're not original, creative, or funny, and no one gives a shit. Fosters. This encompasses the talk of alcohol, social events, and holidays. Football. Well, football obviously, but also the bread and circuses they lap up and the popular culture they consume. Food and fucking. No examples needed. It seems to me, more generally, that what people like talking about are basic biological drives. The kind of things a troglodyte spends all day trying to satisfy because they didn't have the benefit of mass production and supermarket shelves piled high all the time. I like to think that my interests and abilities are beyond that. We have mass production, modern medicine, labour-saving devices and personal transport, etc. That means we now have the time to consider and enjoy far more complex things than basic biological needs. You get out what you put in. The more complex, the more enjoyable. So, there you have it. 25 points or reasons why talking to people is fucking boring, useless, a waste of time, counterproductive, uninteresting, and just not worth it. Many of the ideas I introduced will share similarities with others and or be used at the same time. Some are discreet and some are overt. Many are an attempt at control and manipulation. All are fucking disgusting. For people like us, you're still listening, aren't you, who enjoy discussion, it makes it all but impossible. If you actually call people out on these tactics, often you are the one who is said to be in the wrong. It seems that people do not care about the truth or being honest, and that most people's intention in discussion is to win. If this means they perpetuate an incorrect model of reality, then that is what they will do. Responses to these awful ways of operating include not talking to these people. This can be difficult, especially when what is being talked about affects you. However, trying to productively talk to people who use these tactics or engage in this behaviour is counterproductive. I suggest reading a book, non-fiction of course, reading a research report or anything interesting and informative presented in prose, because I've noticed that even people who I thought better of usually feel in one or more of the ways above. Einstein said, "One of the strongest motives that lead men to art and science is escape from everyday life with its painful crudity and hopeless dreariness, from the fetters of one's own ever-shifting desires. A finely tempered nature longs to escape from the personal life into the world of objective perception and thought." Regarding that quote, stand by for an upcoming video discussing why there is no such thing as opinion and subjectivity, and how we can escape into the world of objective perception and thought. Bye bye now.